we're just gonna give a brief introduction of ourselves, Frederik and I, and then we're gonna give you a quick run through of our motivation for doing it and politics of nature, the game as it is and why it has become. And and then we're gonna open the floor a little bit and understand what you think of it and what you did not understand. So I think I'll leave the word to Frederik and allow him to speak a little bit with you guys.
Right. Hi, everyone. Well, my name is Frederik, and I am the one half of the initial Politics of Nature project. I'm 35 years old. I'm from Copenhagen, and Jakob and I have been working together for 8 years. This is our 4th year. And hello, background sound. Hello, fantastic. And then, like, on top of this, then Jakob and I have been friends for the past 20 years. So we know each other very well. And well, I hold a master's at the IT University of Copenhagen in digital innovation and management. I have worked with virtual reality for several years. I have a past as both an entrepreneur, involved in theater, and also I've been a professional football player when I was way younger than I am right now. And yeah, Jakob?
Yeah, I'm 37 years old by now, and I've spent the past 10, 12 of these in trying to find ways in which we can possibly understand our world better and develop systems allowing us to make smarter decisions and more just decisions. And in 2012, I presented this idea academically of how we would be able to understand the environmental footprints of the products that we engaged with and build a digital platform so that people could access these on smartphones. And this was where Frederik and we started working together instead of just being good friends who had a lot in common. We suddenly also had this idea in common that we might just be able to do something. At that time, we were super dramatic about it, that we could avoid the world from falling apart. And that was how we went about things. And and then as we kind of understood that it would be very, very, very difficult to make any change unless we became better at actually talking with each other, Frederik got me involved in politics of nature as I was casually doing my PhD, trying to make accounting of how food basically impacted our world. And then I got into politics of nature, and that has been a true passion of mine for many years. And this visit to Ukraine just reinforced why it matters. Why seeing we got that huge privilege of spending one day together with some super dedicated and smart young folks, just like yourself, who actually wanted to do something differently than what is currently being done. And so now I'm just eager to spend my time, invest my energy in trying to see if I can do something, push this idea a little bit further, and hopefully you guys will find it interesting enough to spend some time with it. And Frederik?
Yeah, just like, so politics of nature grew as like a very interesting enfant terrible, which is like, would it be possible to take like a super complex political philosophy and turn it into something feasible for people that don't necessarily read academic articles like that much. And that was kind of like the offset. How can we make these thoughts accessible? The first idea was to turn it into a virtual reality game, which led us to Brazil and led us to have game workshops over there. And all of a sudden the game started molding into something else that took us to South Africa, when there was again, like a huge, like political need for like a game or like a political format like this that could experiment and challenge what like the status quo political system was doing. Like, so, and again, that all of a sudden that led us to coming back to Denmark, making like new prototypes of the games, taking us to game festivals around Europe with playtests where everything has been yet more refined. And yeah, then Corona came, and then everything has been a little bit, what do we do? Can we make an online version of it? And but like for us, like the real thing is for real people to meet and actually play and talk and interact. That is where like the biggest learning potential is. So, and even though we're sitting here in this online format, then like, yeah, bear in mind that the game is a physical meeting game. That's where like the beauty really lies, if you ask me.
Yeah, we are actually really cautioning against doing any kind of political decision making in these digital forums solely, simply because there is so much emotional communication between us that is lost when we're just looking at these screens. And it's the smallest of signs that makes us aware that we need to pause and reconsider that the world in which we live might just be inherently different from the one that we're standing and talking to. And if you don't catch these signs, the chances of us, getting it all wrong and stepping on each other's toes is just infinitely greater. So yeah, I think we will dive into a presentation of the game. We decided not to do like a round the table introduction of everyone, and I hope you're all okay with that. And perhaps if you have questions or comments, please just, in Politics of Nature, we've implemented a series of hand signs that I'd like to introduce you to. They've actually shown to be quite good when we're doing Zoom talks. And the first hand sign is like hand up like this. It obviously takes that your camera is turned on, but it's a good way of indicating that you want to say something to what is currently being said. And that hand sign makes us rapidly pause and ask. If you have something, if you have something that might be a little bit off topic or changing topic, you just put up your index finger, and that will not be as urgent as this one. And if you think that we're saying something that you find is utterly nasty or should be contested immediately, put up your fist, and then we will stop immediately, and then we will hear what we're saying that has somehow crossed you, so that we can get that resolved and move on in a much more gentle fashion. So that's the code of conduct in how we're going to move forward. And please, unlike many other talk formats, unless we specifically tell you to not interrupt for a while, please do throw up your hand if you need to. And all questions are good questions. So I'll try and share my screen and see if I can get my sound and everything to run. And do you all see my screen? Frederik, can you indicate? Yep, cool. So yeah, as Frederik said, politics of nature is an interpretation of a philosophy by the French contemporary philosopher Bruno Latour, and his work is called Politics of Nature. Now we're just calling the game Pon to avoid any misunderstandings. And even though you really want to do it, and you pick up the book of Politics of Nature, or you look through the PhD thesis, you'll find that Pon is not Latour's work. It's heavily inspired by Latour's work, but it is definitely very different. And that's the only way that we could find it possible to take Latour's very interesting philosophy for a diplomacy of existence and changing it into a diplomacy applicable for everyday use, something that you could use to discuss your life, daily stuff in your life. Who should take the dishwasher? Who should wash the dishes? Who should do the laundry? How should you balance your life? Or extremely complicated questions such as how do we, as a nation state, decide to implement a CO2 taxation? The game as such, I know it sounds almost absurd, but it's designed to try and evolve into handling the controversies in which it's deployed. So, and if you find that I speak too fast, I have a habit of doing so, please also just either write it in the chat and then Frederik can signal me. I don't see the chat at this current moment. Okay, so if I could get my screen to change slides, I'll now play a meditation, the first meditation of Politics of Nature, and it's time to just listen.
Close your eyes. Calm your thoughts. Relax your body. Sit comfortably and breathe. Let me take you by the hand and lead you onto Pun. On Pun, there is no longer any difference between humans, things, plants, animals, feelings, and concepts. Everything is equally real and as such exists equally in the same world. All things on Pun are considered beings. What is common to all beings is that they express themselves through their actions and associations with other beings. On Pun, the complex web made up of these interactions is known as the collective, aka the good common world. All beings enjoy equal rights to negotiate their existence. Some can speak by themselves, others need help. They are acting out the democratic needs of tomorrow. It is time to venture further onto Pun. It is time to explore the procedure. The next steps on this journey requires your eyes wide open. Abre los ojos. Open your eyes.
So this meditation gives you a brief introduction about, or kind of pulls you into the world that is Pon. And Pon is a different view than the very commonly held view of what the world is. what is known as the modern ontology. In the modern ontology, which is easily described as the figure here on the slide to the left, is where you have a culture that is either above or is kind of describing the world, the ecosphere, the nature inside. In the flat ontology, which we have embedded into PON, there is not a nature apart from a society, as you can see in Latour's diagram, the one on the right-hand side on your screen. You see there is Latour's diagram is divided into a left and a right-hand side. The left side is where you see nature as apart from society. That's not what we're trying to do in politics of nature. In politics of nature, PON, basically there is just one world, but this world is constantly growing. It means that there is no difference between what you think of the world, your perspectives of the world, and the world that you live in. This is all the same thing. It's kind of an odd way of constructivism, if you're acquainted with realism versus constructivism in the philosophical debate. But it is not just the constructivism as the world is constructed. The world is both constructed and real simultaneously. It's fabricated, Latour would say. And in this world, we've decided to call the things that exists in it, as you heard in the meditation, for beings. And beings, the best way to understand it is that these are everything that we give names. A lamb, a cup, a thermo, a cup, a person, love, anything that you have a noun for in your language is a being. Now, these beings are then connected to one another by associations in the flat ontology. And these associations are easily understood as the verbs connecting the beings. Jakob drinks coffee. So there are two beings and an association between the two things. And what's important to understand in the flat ontology is that there are no guaranteed subjects nor objects. Just because I'm a human, I'm not the sole subject, the one who has agency to do something. No, the coffee has agency as well. The coffee makes Jakob awake. So in that sense, the relationship between what is an object and a subject in a flat ontology is constantly shifting. So these are some really important things to grasp in terms of how PON is or what informed PON. This is not our ideas. These are not even the ontology with which Frederik and I grew up. We are very modern people until we were non-modern. But we were most certainly modern before we became non-modern. Politics of nature. Latour, as Latour laid it out, he described this different way of making sense of a world, this different way of reaching decisions. On how to reach decisions, he does not say very much, to be quite frank. But what he did, some of the things that he did lay out was that there are 6 important skill sets. And these are skill sets that are drawn from the world that we know. And there's a scientist, the politician, the artist, the moralist, the administrator, and the diplomat. The artist was formerly known as the economist, or that was Latour's word for this skill set. Now, these skill sets, Latour intended for them to have certain responsibilities for the procedure, who were to govern the new constitution, as he calls it, the new way in which we constantly constitute our world. And so Frederik and I, we decided to embed certain, let's call it normative positions into these skill sets, things that we have through our life discovered as being incredibly important. For instance, in order to be a diplomat and be respected by all parties, you need to be very apolitical. And the best inspiration that we have found for the diplomat is highly odd, Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton has actually provided us with a very, very astounding description of how you can actually have fans who are raging Republicans or extremely liberal Democrats, and that they can embrace each other. They can meet in Dolly Parton concerts and be best of friends while they are there, even though outside they would immediately turn into violent fights, both verbal and physical. So and the same way we've done it for all these skill sets. We've tried to write in some of the positions that we find incredibly important if we are to have an attentive political system. And apart from that, each skill set also carries some procedures that they will carry out in order to drive the process forward. Politics of Nature is a board game, and it's a board game designed with 4 stages originally, and you're progressing through them. And in each step in this long process, the different skill sets will have different things that they will need to take care of. So each player, when a new round begins, will have a skill set. But it's not just their skill set. No, they will be responsible for the guilds of the scientists, the guild, you know, the association of scientists, and everyone has to act as scientists. And the scientist, for instance, has to ensure that everything is empirically sourced. Now, empiricism, for one thing, just to take a little bit off a strand, is something that is highly odd, because politics of nature is very pluralistic. This is not just ontologically pluralistic. What exists in the world differs, and how we can understand what exists in the world also differs in politics of nature. Some people find dreams to be a very credible source of information, while other people don't. And this is key in this game, is that we constantly need to navigate this pluralistic game. So, but back to the skill sets and back to the roles, each player will have the responsibility for enacting the scientist's position in one role, in one round, and in another round or in the subsequent round, these skill sets will shift, and you will then have to be responsible for the politician skill set in the subsequent round. And by shifting these skill sets around and constantly having to do different things, as we said, the diplomat will have to be fiercely apolitical, and the politician will have to be extremely stringent in prioritizing. And these are really, really difficult things to align, to the point where Frederik and I, while striving to be or performing all 6 skill sets in our daily life, we are also very much aware that doing so is probably not possible simultaneously. But by shifting the skill sets around, you will, by playing the game, eventually get better and better at becoming a good scientist, a good politician, a good artist, a good moralist, administrator, and diplomat, as we intended it. And as Pon is an evolving game, as you will learn later, maybe as you intended it to be. So this was for the skill sets. Now, there are 4 stages in Pon, and how you begin the game, you always start out by finding something that you want to talk about, something that matters to you or matters to the group of people. The game is designed for 6 people to play, And when you start out, you decide on when you need to make a decision. Is this something that has to have a decision tomorrow or in a week's time or something like that? And that is a cutoff criteria, because that is resembling political processes in the real world, and how we have to have decisions. Sometimes we need to make a decision at a certain point in time. Then you draw ambassador tokens. I'll not touch on that. You can read about it both in the thesis and in the manual. It's basically about privacy. And then you draw the skill sets and you meditate, as we did earlier. And then what you do in the first part of the game is you start identifying the things that we talk about, the beings. You identify the beings, and then you find out who is going to talk on their behalf. It does not mean just because I am becoming the ambassador, the one that talks on behalf of a being, that Frederik could not also talk on behalf of that being. It's just that I'm responsible for making sure that this being is being articulated. And that also means identifying people who are much better at talking on the being's behalf than I will be, whether these are around the table or somewhere else. Now, this is the first, or not even the first, this is the third version of the game board, and I think it's highly confusing to look at. So I don't even know if I want to dwell on it, but
it remains beautiful. It remains beautiful.
Yeah, it's a design project of a non-design student, Jakob. So basically what you can see here is the stage 1, and then you go into stage 2, and up here stage 3 with wall of fears and desires, that goes down to stage 4, which is the parliament of things. And then you evaluate whether or not you're capable of making a decision, and if not, you play another round. And that is just how the game keeps going, round and round and round. Now, second stage. What you do in the second stage is what we have come to call either the border patrol or the immigration office, and directly words taken directly from the tour. And this is what is, this is how you build the world. So you start with a controversy. You have the players as ambassadors, and then you have a theme, and that theme could be, for instance, climate change. And then you identify all the beings that you find are relevant for this controversy. And then when you find them, you want to bring them on to PON, and you link them with this climate change. And you do so by exploring associations. So for instance, if Frederik is the ambassador of CO2, and he says that I think that CO2 should be admitted onto PON because it is highly relevant for climate change. And then a scientist could go and say, hey, but why is that? Why is that? Are there any sources? And then you start elaborating the associations between the being climate change on PON and the beings trying to enter PON. And if there are associations with an empirical source described, or stating that there is at least a source, there is a reason why this is something. There's just not something that Frederik is saying because he finds it funny at this very moment. Then you're starting to link these things together, and then you are beginning to visualize the collective. Then there are another points here. The moralist is responsible for constantly keeping an eye out of the missing beings. Who are we missing? And the politician constantly needs to remind other people that they might not be the best representatives. So are we missing any ambassadors? And then you have to rank the beings. I just needed to browse quickly through my presentation. I'll skip this for now because it will take up time, but it is vastly important for understanding the system analysis that PON is capable of delivering, but I really suggest you to read both the manual and the thesis to understand this. In brief, what you're seeing is a matrix where you see beings listed on the diagonal like this, and the associations between the beings being listed and mapped with data points inside the matrix. This is incredibly important for understanding the analytical power of politics of nature. It's not just a simple game. It's a game that will allow you to understand extremely complicated systems. When you're visualizing the collective, this is the image of it. So as you bring more things in, you will start building connections between them. The connections that you see here, the one that I'm pointing at right there, that connection would be equivalent to a space inside the matrix. When I said ranking, you are to do 3 rankings as you play politics of nature. And this is inherently important for the decision system in politics of nature. Here we have moved far beyond voting. What you are interested in doing as you start doing a ranking is that you want to firstly rank the current endangerment. So here is a system where you have 6 beings on PON. Now, what you're interested in understanding with any system really is, are the things that exist in this system, are they doing well? Are they thriving, surviving, or are they declining and going into inexistence, extinction? So when you have these beings, you're going to try and rank them on this left side, whether or not they're surviving or dying off, existence or extinction. And then the politician is responsible for ranking how desired or indispensable these beings are. So you then rank rank them, and this is a very normative position of the politician. You just rank them as you think that they matter. Are these beings desired or are they undesired? And there are some circles around, and these are called mismatches. If something is found on the extinction area, but is considered desired and indispensable, there is obviously a mismatch in how the system is working. We see a lot of animals going extinct, and we immediately understand that they should not go extinct. And there are a lot of things like weapons that probably should go extinct, that is thriving. And suddenly we can see that this system, we can find the imbalances, and that just to understand the imbalances allows us to explore how we can modify the system. And this is what you do in the 3rd stage. You come up with ideas of how you can modify the system. I'll not dive further into it, but what you will end up with in the 3rd stage after an ideation process is a proposal for a good common world. Now, this proposal of a good common world is taken into this Parliament of Things, which happens in the 4th and final step of each round. Here there is a deliberation where every ambassador for beings is to answer, now, if we implement a certain proposal, what will that mean for the beings that I represent? And then you start understanding or visualizing internally and as a collective group of thinkers who are trying to solve a difficult thing, what will actually happen. And if this proposal is going to compromise a being that you represent as an ambassador, you're going to object to it. But if the being that you represent is not going to die by the implementation of this proposal, moving from existence to extinction, but it remains in existence, even though it's not happy, you have to consent. This is what we call radical consent. Now, then you go through a process. Let's see here, you have the future endangerment. Here you rank the things for each proposal, and if the proposal is favorable to the status quo, meaning that there are less mismatches between a proposal and the current status quo, that proposal has to be implemented. Meaning if it's a smart proposal and if it's better for the world, then there is no other way than implementing it. And in order to be able to implement proposals, the collective needs to be sufficiently informed that there are no beings in the horizon. This means that the moralist has not stopped the process and say, hey, we did not think of this being, or we did not think of that being. That pond has been sufficiently stabilized. That brings us back to this learning curve. If we are on a steep learning curve, on the y-axis, you have number of beings. On the x-axis, you have round numbers. So a steep learning curve means that more and more beings are being added constantly. So that has to flatten out. Otherwise, you have not finalized your discussions. That all relevant ambassadors have been heard, that today's procedures are compatible with yesterday's, and that everything is sourced. These are criteria for making good decisions. So when these things are said and done and it works, then proposals can be implemented. And then you come to the final thing, and which we hope that most of you are going to find this interesting enough to pick it up and play with. And that is that you challenge PON. When you've played that round, you say, what would we like to change to make this process better for our purpose? And then you change it, and then you change the game, and you do that every round until it, and we always need to change. The thing is, we're living in democracies that are not changing. And how absurd is that? Why not constantly be looking for how we can change the very way in which we are making sense and making decisions? So this is our call, try something different, change it, find a way that allows you to make the right decisions in your life. So that is really politics of nature, and I will stop my presentation here because I could understand that I've already spent a lot of time. And I think Frederik covered the evolution of the board game earlier. So sorry for speed talking crazy, but there is some ground to cover.
Not at all, not at all. Like, great run through, Jakob. And if I should add something like that we don't have the time to completely run through, like this is kind of, you've gone through like the political process, like the 4 stages, but there are so many like pro-social skills that is extremely important for PON to succeed. So there is respectful behavior that needs to be in place. You need to be able to listen more than you talk. There are like talking tokens, meaning that all ambassadors have an equal amount of time to speak, that you need to be very like conscious, like when are you actually like, and that also something that is very applicable to the real world, where you would easily find in discussions that someone will take the word and then don't leave it for anyone else. So we've tried to embed that pro-social skill in the game as well. And there are a lot of room for emotions, and there are a lot of room for forgiveness, because, and that's, you can also see that the meditation, there are 3 meditations in the game. You experienced the first one, but it's so important that we are not just only up in our minds when we are deciding on future scenarios for a lot of beings and existences, that we also need to come down in the body and actually being able to feel what the consequences actually would be for others. We hope that the game is an empathy enhancer. And so I usually I describe politics of nature as a mix between political process, group therapy, and Dungeons and Dragons. And
yeah, I think one last thing to the speaking thing that that should be brought in, that is that you're not allowed to provide fallacies. Do not talk shit. If you say something that is unfounded or not sourced, and someone objects to what you're saying, and if the collective finds out that, yeah, what you're saying, that's just deteriorating our process, you lose your speaking tokens. You'll get them back after the round there, and sometimes you will be asked for things and you will have to answer, but you are not allowed to engage or commence any talk if you disrupt the process. So disruptive political behavior, which is what we witness all the time, is not possible by design, or at least will be, the punishment is pretty harsh. Yeah.
Perfect. Like, and the final remark would be that this is a game, at least designed for optimal disagreement. Jakob said earlier on that this is a game promoting pluralism, but it's really important to state that this is not about like favoring any kind of worldview. It's actually finding a platform, an arena for multiple worldviews to come and being able to respectfully speak with one another. Floor's open for questions.